On the simplest level, what the VCS, the Atari 2600, what that is, it's a combination of plastic and computer chips that enables you to play a video game, an interactive video game on your home television, which is something that never really happened before.
If you're making an arcade game, it begins as a hardware project. If you need something more in the hardware, just put it in the hardware and you can use it in your game. The Atari 2600, we didn't have that luxury. The game was already in Grandma's house. It was already hooked up to her TV. And all we could do is make a different cartridge, sell that to the person, he plugs it in.
It was the thing that made video games a worldwide phenomenon. And all it is it's a box that enables you to play an interactive game on your TV. But on a cultural level, that's such a huge thing to do, because there were two things that achieved that changed the world, literally changed the world. One is it put computers in homes. At a time where IBM only had about 10,000 PCs sold altogether, Atari had millions of units installed, and every one of those was a computer in the home. The other thing it did was it created an interactive medium with television, which was always a passive medium. Before video games, people were just zombies sitting on the couch watching TV. But video games turned people into zombies jumping up and down on the couch yelling at the TV. And that was a very different experience. And I think that was huge in terms of taking people from a passive state to an active state. And we're still learning the implications of that.
The entire reason that Atari created the Atari 2600 home console was to put their arcade hits into the home. If we can sell home versions of our arcade hit games into the home, we can sell millions of them instead of just take quarters from the thousands of people who go to arcades. And so the hardware was designed to make it possible to play Tank and Pong. That's about all that they did in the hardware.
So the distinction is this. CoinUp gets to use more expensive hardware. They get to use tons and tons of hardware, and they get to refresh their hardware all the time.
I had played an Outlaw-like game in the arcade, I think it was Midway, and I was just told to make a game, so I said, well, here's an idea, two guys shooting at each other, and so I made that game. My goal is to try to make it like the arcade game, so I could look at the arcade game and say, this is what it has to do. So there really wasn't any need for me to have communication with the arcade guys. I'm particularly proud of the Atari 2600 Canyon Bomber because it also has the Atari arcade game Depth Charge in it. So it turns out that in a 2K byte Atari 2600 cartridge, I simulated both Canyon Bomber and Depth Charge, which were probably $3,000 arcade game hardware.
When I was young, when I was little, I remember there was this drugstore, and in their comic book rack, they had these abridged versions of great literature. You'd read it, and it was the whole story of Treasure Island. War and Peace, a comic book. But that whole notion of an abridged version, that is what was going to happen.
When I did Donkey Kong, I had, not surprisingly, absolutely no contact with Nintendo. Coleco was able to get me a machine. So I had a machine. that I could play and look at, and I had already played the game. And like David said, with Canyon Bomber, the game is the spec. Frankly, the hardware is so different in its capabilities that I can't think of any value I would have had getting in touch with anybody at Nintendo. It's like talking to the guy who created the Porsche Carrera about making a bicycle. I mean, it's like, there's not a lot there. Not a lot you're gonna tell me. Here's this masterpiece and do it on this toaster, you know? And I was young enough and stupid enough to not be intimidated. And I wasn't, because I was just a kid. I was like, no big deal.